In terms of like the perfect partner, this may be challenging for some people, but I believe everyone would be a perfect partner because everyone has something to teach us. What challenge does is it actually gets you to buy into the relationship again. In the beginning of a relationship, we tend to have infatuation. A lot of people do want someone who is more than same as them than different.
In what contexts? Where are you experiencing pleasure as you've just described that?
People want to be strong so that people invest in them.
What is it that I have to do in order to experience that thing?
It's difficult to understand where the pelvic floor is.
Hello, Tanya. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for making the change in time zones work. I think I'm pretty fortunate that you seem to be up really late and up really early. I don't know when you sleep, so it actually wasn't that difficult to make it work.
So thank you for having me.
So today I wanted to talk about relationships, relationship dynamics, partner choice. This is one of the topics that honestly fascinates me. I think we spend so much time either trying to get into a relationship or trying to manage the relationship we're in. And I honestly think it is such a complex but interesting topic. So I really thought I'd love to talk about this with you today.
Yeah, it's definitely been a topic of fascination for me as well, because, you know, growing up with my parents, where they separated really when I was quite young, and in just seeing that so many people have such struggles in this particular area, you know, that because it's, you know, there's some individual that's so close to you in your personal space, and they sometimes have a tendency to really trigger you in some of your challenges. And so being able to, like, how do you effectively move through that? What's also really interesting and fascinating is that everyone has a different purpose or a different mission in life. And then how do you get two people who maybe have different views on life? How do you get them to come together and have, you know, a deeply connecting relationship when they have different wants and needs and drives and visions for life as well?
And what do you think, because there's these two schools of thoughts, there's opposites attract. So this is like touching on what you just said. We all have different purpose, like a different purpose here and different values. But then we always try to find someone who's similar to us. You know, when we're in that beginning phase, we're like, oh, we think the same. We have the same sense of humor. So like, what is the dance between finding the similarities and then obviously the opposites?
Well, I don't know if there's a standard, like, you know, ratio of what you need in a relationship, because every relationship is going to be really different. But a lot of people do want someone who is more than same as them than different. So when they write a list, you know, their list of the things they want in a relationship, it's tend to be all the things that they love. If they value health, they want someone to also value health. If they into eating, you know, healthy food, they want someone to eat healthy food. If they're into like growing wealth, they want someone to have, you know, join that journey of growing wealth as well. And so we have a tendency to look and seek for similar, but it's actually the differences that actually help us to grow and to challenge ourselves and to get us to think differently. So I know in my previous relationship, my spouse was into politics, and I had kind of disowned that part of me. I was like, oh, that's not really my thing. And you know, just listening to him speak about politics, and him particularly in American politics, for him, he just lights up, and there's so many interesting dynamics, and because I'm into human behavior and I love learning about people, I just started to kind of open up to this idea of like, wow, you know, he has so much to teach me in what's really important to me with his politics, that I actually like and enjoy sitting down now with him and hearing all his stories that he has to share. Instead of kind of going, well, I don't like the difference and I want to separate. It's like, actually, let's figure out a way how to come together, and then we you kind of bridge the difference, and it makes it a really connecting experience. So the differences can be challenging if you think that there's no connection for you. So I don't know, in terms of like having a ratio, I think everyone's going to be really different. Like some people thrive off the difference because they like having their own independence, and some people actually prefer having, you see some couples where they're like together for 50 years and they like the same things, and they like traveling to the same type of destination, and they really enjoy having that really bonded couple experience where they have a lot of similarities. And then some people just like the differences. So I don't know if there's a standard ratio, but I guess it's where you're going to grow the most, or what you value the most.
Yeah, I guess what I'm also getting out of what you're saying is you don't need to be fearful when you find someone and you feel they have such different interests to you. It's not something you need to run from. You can lean into that. And yeah, you can see it as, I see it as delegating sometimes when I know my partner is really into some things that I'm not into, but I do kind of want those things to be done and managed. So he gets to do those and I get to get them done. So I guess there's that as well. And what would you say is the first step? This is for the single people out there. So what is the first step in finding your perfect partner? And is there even such a thing as a perfect partner?
Oh, okay. Well, let's just like, what's the first step? Well, oh gosh, I have to prioritize. Hang on, let me prioritize, because there's so many things that you can do. One is you have to get really clear about what's your why, about why you want to find a partner in the first place. Because I've seen some, particularly women have just, and sometimes men as well, like have this really big struggle because they're attached to having a relationship, because having a relationship means success. Like it means that they're validated in society, and it means that, they're pleasing their family or whatever it is. And there's this attachment to success, because if you're in a relationship, it's successful, but if you break up, it's a failure. And so we just have this, preconceived idea that relationships and being together and being, coupled up is a better life. And so I'd encourage people to really dig deep into why do they want to be in a relationship in the first place. And if it is driven because of those things, I would maybe do some introspection, say, is that really truly important? Or find a new purpose to why to be in a relationship instead of that being a driver. So I would start there, because your why is so important. That would help to give you more purpose to create a relationship, or to find a partner. In terms of like the perfect partner, this may be challenging for some people, but I believe everyone would be a perfect partner, because everyone has something to teach us. So we can find, because you can learn a lot from a lot of different people. But in terms of what I think the word perfect might mean is, if we look at it from what most people think perfect is, it's this like perfect, great relationship, and it's wonderful and blissful. We're never going to find that perfect, blissful partner that everything is rosy and great. We're going to find, people that are going to help us to essentially grow, to challenge ourselves, to love ourselves more. And so I don't know if we can ever find like the perfect individual that is, the one-sided version of perfection, but we can find someone that we can definitely grow with.
And then how do we, when we're getting into a relationship, I find sometimes you're looking back at previous relationships and you're remembering the things that you really liked about that other person. And now you're comparing this new relationship, and you're kind of sabotaging this new relationship because you are comparing just a few things. It's really unfair, because you're just picking out a few things from a previous relationship or partner. Like, how do we basically not do that? Not compare our current one?
Sure. I mean, that's human behavior. Like we go through, some kind of, experience, whether it's a job or whether it's a relationship, and then we siphon out the things we don't like. We get the things we like, and we move on to the next relationship or the next job, and then we do the same thing. So if we keep on doing that with blindly not even going back and doing some, review of that relationship, what worked, what didn't, what could you have done, where could you have learned and grown from that experience, and love more of the challenges, we tend to almost avoid certain negative perceived experience from the past relationship. Say, for example, they were a drinker, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be with someone who drinks, and then you want to go find someone who never drinks, and then you find someone who never drinks, and then you get there and you're like, oh my God, they're so boring and they don't do anything. And or then you go, I want to find someone who's like really into sport, and then they're so obsessive into sport that you're like, it's all consuming, and you have no weekend because that's all they're doing is sport over the weekend. And so then you find the pain associated with the newfound desires that you have. You find actually there's just pains in there as well. So the wisest thing we can do is, whenever we end a relationship, in order for us to not take the baggage from the last one and bring that into the next one, and then take the one for that next one into the next, we want to do whatever version of like introspection that can be helpful for you to go and clear any of that baggage. So, for example, if it's something that you've not liked in that previous relationship, if you could just ask the question, like, how did it serve me? Whatever it is, what was the benefit? And keep on repeatedly asking that question until you find the blessings in that experience. Then the heaviness and the emotional charge of that, it doesn't weigh you down to go, oh my God, I don't want to have that in my next relationship. You know, it's a blessing. I choose not to have it. But you're not running away from it.
Yeah.
Instead.
And I want to go a little bit deeper into that, because I know that sometimes what happens is when you say, okay, fine, what did I learn from that relationship? Immediately you want to say, well, I learned to never accept that again, or, that type of thing. Or I learned that's not the type of person I want to be with, which is different to what you're saying in terms of truly finding an appreciation for however that person was, whatever they did. I've just noticed that is a tricky thing. Like, some people can say, yes, I learned that I don't want that in a relationship, or I learned that I would not accept that again. But that is different to truly appreciating the traits or actions of that previous person, and not, like you say, not running away from it into your next relationship.
Well, for sure. Like, I'm working with a couple at the moment, and they had one of them has gone outside the relationship, and then one of them has gone, well, I don't want to have that. I want to exit the relationship, and I want to leave that relationship because I never want to. Like, I don't want that for my relationship. And so then they're going, well, if she turned around and said, well, I don't never want to have that happen to me again as a benefit. Well, that's still avoiding what actually happened. It's not actually finding the blessings of her spouse cheating on her. And so it's important to go back to the moment of when she found out that he had cheated, and ask, well, how did it serve her? How did it serve the relationship? How did it serve him? How did it serve her and her career as well? And so the more you can ask these questions, how did it help her physically? How did it help her mentally? Until we did this process, and we kept on asking benefit, until she actually had this like spontaneous, like, whoa, because it's completely changed their relationship. Like, they are more heart focused than they've ever been before. He's shifted and realized how disconnected he was in the relationship before, and he's way more present and connected than he's ever been before, and more buy-in than ever before. And so there's all this like beautiful kind of enriching blessings that happened as a result of the cheating. So then, instead of seeing the cheating as bad and it's wrong and shouldn't have happened, she now has like a feeling of gratitude for it, that if they're still in the process of deciding whether they stay or exit from the relationship, but at least she knows that if she goes out, if she's not leaving to avoid that pain and think that another relationship is better for her, but she can actually decide, I want to choose to exit the relationship because it's what I want, or she chooses to stay in the relationship and get a deeper, profound connection with them together.
I think especially when you get into cheating or infidelity, it's such a charged topic, and I think so hard for anyone in that moment to start seeing, well, what are the benefits? I just feel like that is so hard.
Oh, for sure. Like, I mean, I know what it felt like when I was in my early 20s. I had, the guy I was like totally in love with. We worked together, we trained together, we ate together, we did everything together. I went away for like 2 weeks, and he cheated on me, and he got married to that girl a little while later. But it like wrenches your heart and breaks your heart. And what happened was, because I didn't know the work that I know now and the questions that I know to be able to shift my my perception of things, it was a lot of time that had to pass before I realized, you know what, it was actually the biggest blessing he could have ever done, because as a result, for me, it like shifted me in my career. I no longer did what I was doing. I shifted into what I'm doing now. I began the journey into what I was doing now. I traveled overseas and took a world trip and just expanded my horizons. It was just a really deeply kind of growth spurt for me, because I was so almost insular in a relationship with him. And then I had this like experience to really kind of step into my like adulthood and really grow as a result. But it took me years to find those, blessings. And so, yes, it can be, if you're going through it and you're like, oh, and there's nothing. It's just, we have that saying, time heals all wounds. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Just because you're in pain right now and you're really struggling, it doesn't have to be that way. You can ask a different question, give a different answer, which will change your physiology, because anyone can feel really angry, and we can talk about all the shit things that happened in the relationship and how bad it was, and how wrong it is to cheat, and we can stack up all the negative things at it, and you'll be like fuming. Mm-hmm. Or we can switch it and go to the other side and go, well, hang on, what is the blessing of it? Because most people, they get deeper connections with family, they get to find a better and a more sense of identity as a result. They maybe they stand up for what they want and what they believe. There's lots of things that, and sometimes people end up finding a new relationship that's actually more deeply beautiful than the previous relationship. So it's actually a blessing they got to exit out of that relationship. And so when we can shift our perception and our perspective of things, our physiology changes. So instead of feeling angry, we start to feel lighter. So you can change. Just because you feel angry doesn't mean you have to stay angry. It's just you can consider shifting the questions that you're asking and the perspective to be able to change how you feel.
And then can I ask you out of interest, so right now, how would you feel if you got cheated on? How do you think you'd feel? I mean, you don't really know unless it happens.
Yeah, that's gosh. I mean, it's been a lot. Like, I mean, I've learned a lot since then. Like, I've definitely learned a lot. I think there's still that like part of me that would feel like, oh God, like a little rejected and a little bit like, oh, that would be really, hard to deal with to begin with. But I also know that when I choose to want to move through that, because, sometimes if I go through something that's painful, I don't choose to work through it straight away. Sometimes I want to sit in my shit for
You like want to call a girlfriend and be like, guys, let's just have a pity party at my house.
Yeah, please, just for a little bit. And then when I make that decision, then I know that I'll be able to work through it. And I'm not going to deny how I feel. Like, if I feel angry and I feel upset and I feel pissed off, I'm going to feel all those things. And then I can consciously make a decision that I'm ready now to evolve, to grow, because I don't want to stay in that level of, and no one wants to stay in that level of feeling, upset and angry and frustrated, because that's not life.
Yeah.
So at some stage, I know I would want to shift and change it, and I'll ask the question that I just shared before, like how has this served me, and keep on asking until I find the order in the experience.
Yeah. And I think with what you're saying, it's making me think about how we need to know that by choosing to work through something like this, by choosing to ask yourself something like, how does this benefit me? It's not that you are being weak or, condoning it, accepting it. You're actually empowering yourself for yourself so that you can grow and become a better person. So it's not something that you should feel like, oh, now I'm just accepting whatever kind of behavior. It's actually that you are empowering yourself so that like something that someone else does affects you a little bit less, and you can actually choose how to move forward in these challenging situations.
Well, for sure. Exactly. Like you can't change the past. You can't change their behavior. You're going to have a magic wand and just, wish it just didn't happen, because it's not going to happen. You can only change your perception of how things, the experience that you just had. And so that's all. And that's, most people want to be empowered. Most people want to wake up and go, you know what? I want to be empowered. I want to choose my life. I want to live the life that's really meaningful to me. And so that also means taking accountability for our emotions and our feelings and our experience of life. You can't control someone else. And just because you're finding benefits, it's not finding so many benefits that then you're like praising of the behavior, and that it's not like that. You want to get to, there's a point that you'll get to when you ask the question over and over again, that you'll actually feel your physiology like calm down. Like your nervous system will no longer be, that kind of like angry heightened, where your fist like ready to, and you feel like you'll actually feel your nervous system calm down. And that's when you know that you're on the journey to really, truly shifting it. But then you want to keep on going until you almost like feel like a tear or your heart expanding and open. That's when you know that you've answered it enough times.
I wanted to go further into something that you touched on earlier. You were saying how, I guess it's society. It's like when you're in a relationship, you're being successful. When the relationship ends, it failed. And obviously that word is like loaded, obviously failing in your relationship. And I personally feel like I would love the way we look at a relationship ending to shift. I don't think that it needs to always be, obviously it's a difficult time. I think a relationship ending is probably a difficult time for most people. There's some identity things. You're not sure what the future is going to be like. There's going to be discomfort, but how do you see a relationship ending? Do you see it as failing? I'm sure you don't. And like, how do we shift our perspective on that?
Well, I mean, I was married 2012. I got married, and I thought I was going to be with my guy for forever. And 13 months later, he came to me and said, we just want very different things, and I don't want what you want anymore. So I think that we need to separate. And there was obviously a bit more to that than just that, but that was the main focus. And that was like super, like I just remember flying home to my parents for the first time and just crying on the plane, just going, I'm such a failure for like not being able to make this marriage work. Like 13 months of being married, and I'm like already on the pathway to getting a divorce. And it took some time to be able to learn from that experience. And so then I fast forward to my previous relationship with my daughter, that I have a daughter with, and we just got into the friend zone. That's what it is. We just got into the friend zone. And then this time around, because I'd learned so much from the first time of realizing, well, that doesn't, just because your marriage ended, it was actually successful for us to end the relationship and do it earlier, instead of waiting 20 years where we're bitter and miserable and upset with each other because we knew that we weren't, on the same kind of like life journey, and been upset with each other, it was actually successful for us. But it took me a while to kind of process that out and to come to that. So then this time around, when as we were grappling with the idea of us separating, we said, well, because we have a daughter together, and it's like there are a lot of like hard, when you're making a decision to separate and you have kids, you're not just thinking about your relationship with them. It's so easy to end a relationship when it's just the two of you. But when you've got kids, it's just all this complex, like, how is it going to be? What's it going to happen? How is my daughter going to feel? Like, so there was a lot of questioning. But when we came to the decision to end our intimate relationship, we actually began our connection as a family in a far deeper and greater way. Like, we stayed actually sleeping in the same bed together for another 8 months, and then we still live together now. We just don't. We have separate rooms, and we still live together. So I feel like it's successful because we've maintained this we've maintained kind of like a sense of a family unit, and we've maintained really good friendship, and we have great co-parenting with our daughter. And it's just a different, I guess, perspective, rather than going, oh, I failed in another relationship and how bad am I? It's just like, I'm also taking a lot of learning that I've done. Like, he's taught me so much about myself and about life and about how to handle, communication. And so I'm going to take those learnings and know that it'll help me in my next relationship that I have, and help me grow in that next relationship. So it's just been a really interesting. So I don't necessarily feel like breaking up is, a failure, and staying together is successful, because I feel like in our dynamic anyway, it's actually more helpful for us to kind of live separate lives and to kind of have, go on a different like romantic journey together, but still stay connected as parents.
Yeah, I really admire the setup that you have, just because it's something that's not really conventional, and you have gone that route, and it's clearly more aligned for you. I'm sure for your partner, I'm sure it's better for your daughter than being in a marriage or being in a traditional relationship that's like a strained relationship. So I think that it's actually quite mind-blowing, because it's not something that you hear all the time, and the fact that you could go on that path is really quite inspiring.
Yeah, and I know that how I felt prior to us separating, like I definitely felt like, I wanted hugs and kisses, like I want affection, and it just wasn't something that we as a couple had very much of. And I just remember feeling like, as much as I love him, I just felt like I was kind of not getting something that was really truly meaningful for me met in that particular relationship and dynamic. And so I would rather be on my own, and single, than show my daughter that I'm going to, like, not necessarily sacrifice, but not just, not have a really fulfilling life. So I'd rather be on my own and not have that than stay in a relationship when I'm not getting something fully met. I would rather her experience and see that. But if I take I should maybe even blow your mind a little bit more. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of relationships and friendships out there like this. But I don't feel like I've led the way in this dynamic between my ex and I. It's actually his ex and him. They're the ones that kind of really showed me this new way and new perspective of a relationship, because they were together for since they were 17, 18, together for 20 something years. And they have a 25-year-old and a 24-year-old. So, they have had a lifetime together. And when they separated, and then him and I came together, she was the one that welcomed me in with open arms, and she was the one that just, loved, all of us hanging out for the girls' birthdays and for Christmas. And it was just, she was the one that kind of really welcomed me into the family. And then when our daughter was born, she came to the hospital and met our daughter on the first day. And, you know, she's just been, you know, she's offered to babysit and to look after her and spends time with her. So she's, I feel like, led the way into kind of a new paradigm of how to do family. So we had Easter just recently. So we had her new spouse and us and their kids. And obviously my daughter's dad and I are not together, but we all three of us went, and we just had this, you know, really beautiful like lunch together. And it's just this new paradigm of how a relationship, or how we can relate to, you know, previous relationships and come together. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And it just shows how one person just acting a little bit differently, and putting, I suppose, I imagine she was putting the needs of maybe her kids first, or, you know, just making that small decision to do that, how it can ripple effect. And actually now you have this whole modern family vibe going on.
It's a very modern family, but I just look, because I love my daughter's 3, and I love her. Like I like she just warms my heart, and I love her so much. And I'm like, if I love her so much, then I love him. I love, you know, her dad, like how because she's half of him. So if I love her, I have to love him. Do you know?
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not cry now. Tanya, I remember once hearing you speak about the stages of a relationship. So I'm bringing this in right after we kind of spoke about separation, because I found it interesting, so interesting that I forgot them, okay? But I remember you speaking, I feel like there were maybe 4 stages of a relationship. I remember one of them was like stonewalling. Do you know what I'm talking about? Can we go through that?
So there's a guy named John Gottman, and he is a psychologist who did a lot of research on couples. So essentially what he did was I think it's something like 30,000 couples that he went and he researched. So he researched and looked at, you know, what are the telltale signs that our relationship is going to fail. Like that was what he was interested in. So what he'd get these couples to do is he'd get them to sit inside of a room, and he'd just observe them talking about something like the dog. So they were, you know, they'd have a conversation about the dog. And they'd notice the level of communication. And so what he found or discovered was that there were 4 what he called the four horsemen of the Acropolis, was that they were the telltale signs. I think I'm going to go off memory, but it was something like 90 or 96 or something % chance that you would actually end in divorce if you experienced these, or any of these 4 actions. And so they were criticism, so being critical of each other. You should have done this, you should have done that level of conversation. Defensiveness, no, I never do that, you know, putting up your guard around it. Contempt, which is just that, you know, like curling of your, like, I just despise you, you know, like, you know, that's like extreme. In terms of like level of resentment. And then the last was stonewalling. So that's where, you know, you put up and you're like, I'm not going to communicate with you. I'm just going to block you and stonewall you. So we can't even have this conversation. So criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling were the 4 actions that indicated that a relationship was on the way out.
But then obviously, I mean, we have criticism in our relationships sometimes. Doesn't mean it's going to end. You're saying more extremely, right?
More extreme. Yeah, more extreme. Like that, you just can't seem to find, you know, like in the beginning where you're so infatuated with the individual and you're like only find good things. It's like the polar end of the opposite side at the end of the relationship, where it's just like
you can't even find something that you like about this person. Okay, yeah, I found that really interesting when you spoke about it before. So I wanted to go back into that. And I'm thinking now with what you were just saying about in the beginning when you're infatuated. Will you give us your take on the difference between love and infatuation?
Oh, okay. So infatuation is, we have a tendency with our mind when we get infatuated that we think about something over and over and over and over again. Like, it has a tendency to kind of like take hold of itself, and then you think about it before you go to sleep. You wake up in the morning, instead of thinking about work, you're thinking about that individual. So the level of degree of that we maybe is occupying in our time, in our minds, can show infatuation. We do the same thing with the resentment as well, but you wake up in the middle of the night and you're so resentful of something you're kind of going over. So our mind is it can sometimes be occupied, and so in the beginning of a relationship, we tend to have infatuation, and I don't know if there's ever going to be a point where we have love straight away. Like, a degree of infatuation is going to create some bonding. It gets you doing fun things that are interesting in the beginning of the relationship. So, but the degree of infatuation is normal. But it's when it's so infatuated that you end up doing things that are not really you that becomes the problem. I remember one time going on a date in my early 20s, and I was a vegetarian at the time. So we go to this place called Oyama's in Brisbane, where I was living, and we go to the teppanyaki bar and we sit down, and he's like, I'll order. And so he orders this like platter of raw sushi, and I'm like, oh, I have to put this in my mouth. And I did like one. I was like, oh, okay, this is all right. Two, and I was like, oh my god, I think I'm gonna like vomit in my mouth. Like, it was, oh my god. And I just left going, I feel like I've just gone against my soul, for eating this fish when it was not what I wanted to do. And so we can have a tendency to do things that are outside, and then so infatuation like that, we want to kind of stay empowered and keep our sense of identity when we're in the beginning, particularly in the beginning of a relationship. But then love, it comes when maybe we have like three major, if you have three major challenges in the beginning of your relationship, like, you got to go through challenge to create a depth of love in that relationship. Because what challenge does is it actually gets you to buy into the relationship again. Each time you have a challenge, you go, do I really want to be with this individual? And you go through the challenge, you come back together, and sometimes, repair that relationship even stronger than before and have a deeper connection. And so you do that a number of times, and then that's like, what, I love this person or this individual. I still want to be with you, even though you piss me off, and even though you challenge me, I still choose to be with you. And so I think that that's when we, kind of have, gone through the infatuation side, where we're just blinded and we're not even noticing anything we don't like until we get the challenges in our face, and then we grow through them, and then reform back together. Then we know that it's more love. You're willing to embrace the challenge and the pursuit of it.
Oh, that was such a beautiful explanation. And like, I did have my own ideas on it, similar to what you're saying, but I've never heard you explain it in that way. So I really loved that. And also because oftentimes when we're getting into a relationship, we think it's a perfect relationship because we never fight and we just agree on everything. And this is just meant to be. But like, really, I love what you said with the depth that comes with going through those challenges. And as uncomfortable as they are at the time, and sometimes they feel like they are going to break you, like you said, you get to choose at that point. You actually get the freedom of choice. Like, do I actually want to work on this or walk away? And then, you do get that sort of depth, and you feel this foundation being built in your relationship, and you feel like it's so much stronger now. Like, every time you go through one of those challenges, at the end of it, because it is hard, but at the end, you feel like just a little bit more resilient within your relationship. You feel a little bit more secure. So, definitely not something to avoid.
No, I mean, there's a great book, which is it's on arguing, and it's something like, I don't know, it's something like The Benefits of Arguing or something like that. I can't remember it specifically, but it's basically, because we are so like almost preconditioned to think that arguing is bad. like fighting just shouldn't happen. And, you know, we do it with our kids, shouldn't fight with each other. But we learn so much when we fight, you know. We learn so much about the other individual. Sometimes things that weren't communicated get communicated. You learn to what the other individual wants, or what unrealistic expectation wasn't met, and then you're like, whoa, I didn't even know that that's what you wanted of me. And so you just get this high level of communication as a result. And so rather than labeling fighting as bad, why not label it as like just a pathway in order to, you know, evolve inside of the relationship?
Yeah, I think that's so helpful and a great place for us to wrap up for today, although I could keep talking to you for hours. But I want to ask you, as we wrap up, the question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what does it mean to you to live a world-class life?
I love your question. I mean, everyone would have a really different perspective, but for me would be like, I love what I do. Like I get a lot of fulfillment out of, you know, bringing tears of gratitude and goosebump moments to people with, you know, whatever emotional stuff they're going through. So I feel like living a world-class, you know, life for me would just be getting to do more of that on a global scale.
That's stunning. And it's lovely because you're already doing that. So you're already living your world-class life. Tanya, thanks so much for our conversation today. I really enjoyed it, and I hope people got some different perspectives here on relationships. Where can people find you? How can they connect? How can they work with you if they want to?
So the best way to find me is either on my website, which is tanyacross.com, so Tanya with a Y, or alternatively, if you're wanting to join a Facebook community, it's called Students of Wisdom Tanya Cross. And so you can join that community, which we have some pretty inspiring conversations about human behavior and universal principles in life. So there's also that there as well.
All right. I hope people will connect. I think you've been doing what you do for how long? 13 years?
Well,
longer?
Oh, yeah. Well, 12 years.
12 years.
This will be my 13th year.
Yeah. Yeah. So you really have a lot to share. So I hope people do reach out and connect with you. Thank you for this conversation. Until our next one, I will see you soon. At the next perfect time, as you like to say.
At the next perfect time.
Bye for now.